Welcome back, everybody, to the Around the Corn podcast. There's like a couple other titles I stumbled on there, where we talk about Bitcoin for 20 minutes and then get back to our regular lives. Tonight, we're having a few drinks as well. My name is Joey. Here, as always, with the Yukon Cornelius and the panelist who is changing his name and not his name descriptor, which is what you should be doing on StreamYard. We'll save that for another time. That's a technical issue on our part. We apologize. First story tonight. A Bitcoin whale with a 14-year wallet history decided to sell 80,000 Bitcoin valued at, are you sitting down, $9 billion US. Didn't sell it OTC, didn't sell it in any kind of specialized, rapid fire in and out way. Just dumped it on the market through Galaxy, realizing something in the neighborhood of 922,976% in gains. Boys, what was this guy thinking? What is going on in the mind of the whale who has $13 Bitcoin in his wallet and decides to wait till 120 to sell? Give it to me. Whale, you go first.
I mean, look, considering I bought a lot of that, I'll go ahead and give my insights from it. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things going on. Number one, the fact that it barely budged the price. I mean, yes, we probably went from 120 to 116 because the macro was pretty good last week. Nothing crazy that would have brought us down, and we're right back up at 120 with a nice EU-US trade deal tonight as we're recording. So the absorption of that is just fantastic, and it shows you there's plenty of people on the sideline waiting to buy at lower prices. So that's great. I'm just curious, is this a buy and hold? Is this a lost and then, oh, wow, I found it again? Is this Ross monetizing after he's out of prison? I mean, the amount of possibilities this was is crazy. The fact that we don't know is pretty impressive as well. Good OPSEC by that person. But yeah, the biggest takeaway for me is the fact that barely left the den, and I'd love to see that.
Yukon.
I would just say, well, I've got one question for Whale first. When you say you bought a lot of it, out of the 9 billion, how much? How much?
What was the number? Yeah.
I'm not revealing that.
How many billions?
Yeah. The other thing, I don't know. I'm reading this off of CoinDesk, but it does say that Galaxy confirmed the sale, but then also noted that it was part of the investor's estate planning strategy. So maybe this is just an old guy that's coming up on the last legs of his life here, and he's trying to figure out how to get this to his kids or his family without just handing over private keys to them. So maybe that's what we're looking at here. I think the biggest takeaway from all of this, obviously, is that it happened and price dropped, 4%, 3%, and bounced right back. So all of these people saying that retail's on the sidelines, I don't know if that's true, because it looks like we're here and, as the whale said, buying it.
Isn't the other bit of the story here that I think the prevailing narrative on extreme Bitcoin maximalist Twitter is that OGs are leaving Bitcoin because of the financialization of the asset, the Wall Streetification, the White Houseification? I don't think that that's a fair characterization of what's happened here, at the risk of using too many Asians in one or two sentences. What do you guys think? Is that a fair assessment? I mean, really, if you look at the sort of price growth, because of the transparent nature of the asset, you can see that people are not selling all the time from 15-year-old wallets. But I want to know what you guys think.
Let me ask you to this, and maybe you don't have to answer if you don't want. I look at my stack and I think if something came up in my life where I was diagnosed with terminal cancer or something, what would I do with my Bitcoin? Would I try to pass on the private keys, or would I liquidate and give my family assets in some other way? I would almost certainly liquidate and give them either cash or something that they understand a bit better. So this is probably what we're looking at, if I had to guess.
Well, it kind of depends too. Do we think this is his entire stack? Do we think it's a small percentage? Because, I mean, my goodness, what if it is 15%? Then this is an incredible sale, and then he's still got plenty for the assets down the line for the planning. So yeah, I'm interested in that.
I think that's actually a good point, because I know even for people who bought KYC free Bitcoin here in Canada, myself included, you're never going to catch me moving that KYC free stack. Never. But the stuff that I bought, with my name and address attached to it, yeah, you may see that move a lot sooner. And my guess is that a guy who understood Bitcoin that early and got that much of it and held on to it for that long, he's got more than what he just parted with. Almost a guarantee. Almost a guarantee. Parting words on this this story before we move on to our friend Jerome. Some head shaking.
Yeah, no, let's get into this briefly, which is the whole Bitcoin OGs. I mean, look, if you're dissatisfied with Bitcoin right now, then okay, so we don't need you anymore. I mean, granted, yeah, you were an early pioneer. It worked out great, but what the financialization of Bitcoin is what's going to bring it to the masses. The masses were never going to log on to these crazy exchanges with random ass sites and passwords and all that jazz. It ain't happening. Okay. The Bitcoin ETFs brought it to the masses. Whatever Block and these companies are trying to do is going to bring it to the masses. No one beyond the extreme 0.01% of Bitcoin autists are going to actually do what a 2011 OG did. So if you want to part with it because it's too financialized, see you later. We don't need you.
I think, another thing that we should talk about is what I'm sure most of the other Bitcoin channels are talking about. Is this enough Bitcoin for this guy to retire?
I heard only 0.1 was enough.
Oh, so God.
I think it might be enough.
Shoot me. There's so much retirement slop out there. Okay, let's move to Jerome. Jerome Powell, Donald Trump, obviously now the very widely viewed and even more widely memed meeting in the, I guess, secret basement of the Federal Reserve building. I don't know if that's the Eccles building or somewhere else. I don't know where that building is in Washington or somewhere adjacent, but there's a project going on. We had two guys who are wearing white hats in this basement. They don't seem to get along, number one. Jerome doesn't want to stand next to him at the beginning of the media interaction. And then Donald Trump pulls out this number just came down. Actually, you're way over budget. Well, that's a different building, actually, Mr. President. I never heard of that one. Well, you heard of it now. And I think you should cut rates, whatever that. And, there's like something out of The Office. And we're seeing now, I think, I would say naked politicization of the Federal Reserve, naked politicization of the Federal Reserve chairman position, and I think also naked politicization of data related to Federal Reserve forecasting and obviously their key lever setting the overnight rate. So why don't we talk about that first? Yukon, what do you make of Jerome, Donald, the white helmets? Incredible scene. Incredible scene.
Yeah, it might have been the basement of a pizza shop there in DC. I don't know, but
oh boy.
I mean, no one can watch those videos and tell me that they're not obviously objectively hilarious. It's the funniest thing ever when he pulls out a piece of paper from his breast pocket and just says, "Oh well, I've got this right here. This just came out. Yeah. He hands him the paper. Yeah, I think it's obvious that all of this stuff has become politicized. No one can tell me that that's anything other than a political stunt to drag someone who's very clearly uncomfortable. You just look at Powell's face, to drag him out there and put that into his hands is just blatantly political. So anyone that tries to tell you that the Fed is some separate entity that works and does things on its own is just completely full of it. The other thing I'll say is that if you look at Polymarket, first of all, I was shocked that after those clips came out and after you could see the friction between those two, the Polymarket chances of Powell being out as Fed chair actually went way down. I think we're sitting at 15% now. Oh. I would have guessed they would have jumped, but they didn't. And the number one front runner for his replacement is Kevin Warsh, who has in recent weeks been openly calling for more coordination between the Fed and the Treasury. So I think if anything, this is just going to become more politicized. And of course, I think that it already is.
Yeah, so I think that Bitcoiners, by proxy of being a Bitcoiner, you figured out the game. You've understood that the financial system is a complete joke. It's causing complete chaos and really negative things for the vast majority of the country and the world. I mean, it's absolutely terrible. If you were to devise an extremely unfair system that only benefits the elites, basically you would do something like this. It's atrocious. And we figured that out. What a lot of the Bitcoiners that aren't, I mean, and most of them aren't, they're not working in the industry, they're not working in investments. They don't understand that the people that are still running the money, which are the boomers for the most part, they believe in the Fed. They do think it's independent. They look at that 2% inflation rate, and they go, we got to get back there because that's the golden ticket. If we get 2% equilibrium, animal spirits, we love it. Newsflash to all the Bitcoiners watching here, that's what they're thinking, and that's how the financial markets are based. So when the boomers and anybody in the financial markets starts questioning the Fed independence for the first time in their life, I mean, granted, they should have done it decades ago, but they're doing it now. When that happens, you start to get that third worldification of the US. It behaves more like an emerging market, and you're going to see Bitcoin take off. Now, all three of us on this stage think that the Fed's been politicized forever, but probably a little bit more intense now. But when we see these people in positions of power to go out and actually maybe sell bonds and buy Bitcoin, which is, you know, Saylor's whole thing of invest in our stuff because we're a better version of Bitcoin-backed bonds than bonds. When the people in charge have the ability to make the decisions to buy Bitcoin, and they're seeing what they believe is that difference of Fed independence and weakening of that, that's going to be massive for Bitcoin. So yeah, as this continues, this is just going to be a hugely bullish development, because if we consider the U.S., which is the dominant country for financial assets, if they become a third world country, if we become a third world country, then Bitcoin's going to the moon.
Yeah, you guys are already third world. I'll tell you why. Since 2000, a couple of examples of the Federal Reserve playing politics. Number one, Greenspan testified in front of Congress in 2001, expressed support for tax cuts to reduce federal budget surpluses for George W. Bush. In 2008, obviously, Bernanke, then the Fed chair, worked with Treasury Secretary Paulson for TARP, $700 billion bailout of I don't know, people who are taking too much risk, I guess is the most generous way to put it. Interest rate cuts in 2019 by Powell at the behest of Trump. The delayed response to the inflation in 21-22 to protect Biden. And now I would say this as well. And we talked a bit about last week, and I think we talked about it privately as well. This idea that the Fed is data dependent. Interesting stuff here from Apollo today or yesterday. The quality of CPI data, obviously in question now. I think a lot of us have been questioning that data for a long time. You just kind of brought it up there, panelists as well. To calculate CPI, the Bureau of Labor Statistics collects 90,000 price quotes. I'm kind of reading from the letter here. When the data is not available, they estimate usually around 10% of the cells. They figure out what they're going to put in there, and they take a wild guess, 10%. The last few months, you know what that number has risen to? The number, the percentage that they're guessing in the CPI every month?
Oh, boy.
What do you think?
25% plus?
30 plus.
Oh, boy.
So a third of the CPI is basically a guess. And when they say guess, I think Harvard economist goes, well, they're just putting together an aggregate of the, adjacent goods, whatever. People who are not retarded say they're using that guessing opportunity to be political and get the result they want from the data and spinning the narrative that they want and making sure they get the interest rate expectation they like and all these other things. So to say the Fed is not political at this point, I think is an obvious farce. And on top of that, just like if you look at the body language of these two guys in that basement, these are two guys who don't like each other. Period. End of story. That is simple as that. Okay. These guys do not like each other. Trump has openly called for Powell's head on a pike 100 times in the last 60 days. He's going to keep doing it. This shadow Fed chair. You got his Treasury secretary talking about how he thinks the Federal Reserve is UBI for academic economists. What is that? Like, do you think Powell doesn't see that? Of course he does. So I expect that the next Fed, media session there, he'll take some questions about that too. What do you make of these comments from the president, from the White House? And by the way, it's not just from the hothead POTUS anymore. It's from the well-rounded, highly accomplished people adjacent to him running silos that directly impact the policies you set and the impact those policies have. So he's going to have to answer for that. Do you guys want to wrap up here? You want to add some further comments? What do you think?
Joey, those CPI numbers that you're talking about, is that core? Is it super core? Is it super duper core? That they don't even have to, you don't have to talk about whether it's 10% that they estimate or 30% that they estimate. And I think Whale said this last week. They can get whatever number they want out of that data without having to fudge any numbers, right? This is just a fact of data analytics. If there's enough data, you can get a story to tell, or you can get the data to tell the story that you want.
Well, it's a great point. And also what happens is the financial markets, they collectively decide what data points they actually care about. So I think what's going to be interesting is it's going to be so easy for Jay Powell not to cut because his whole thing is data dependent. His whole thing is let's see the data come in. There are there are actually tens of data points where it's obviously it's all the stuff that you talked about, the all the jobs numbers, and then there's various job numbers too that some show that the market is extremely hot, some show that the market is terrible. Of course, JPOW can look at the ones that show the market's hot and not have to do anything. So if you're data dependent, you don't have to cut until you leave, with all this data coming in, because there is going to be one data point that supports you continuing to wait. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And something that's been happening recently, which I would encourage everybody to watch, is recently there's been pretty soft inflation data and pretty strong jobs data. The rates market, it'll rally a little bit and then it basically goes back to flat or a little bit worse on the day. The first time we miss, as in if we get a hot inflation print or if we get a really, really good jobs number, I think rates just rip up again, in my personal opinion. And we were close to 5% 30-year and 4.5% 10-year, and that's when people feel like they start getting nervous. And we'll see what happens. But those would indicate that we're not close to a cut.
I know we're at what 16 and a half minutes now. I don't want to take us down a long rabbit hole, but this is tangentially related. They passed the Genius Act, and the idea behind that is to create a higher demand for US stablecoins. And of course, if part of that act is to make sure everything's backed 1-to-1, which would drive demand for US treasuries. What do you think? Is that going to happen? Do we think that's actually going to happen? And what role would that play in the rate environment?
Could I sell you that? And panelists will tell me if my machinations interpretations are correct or not. In my head, I think all this does is soften the blow of an eventual fiscal bazooka in the United States, because most of the time that would drive the USD down. But if you can get everyone in Zimbabwe and Botswana buying USD on their phones, instead of whatever Botswanian seashells, then you keep the demand for those currencies up with third world use instead of worrying about domestic use. And I think that's possible. Also, don't forget, I've still yet to see where Tether fits in the Genius Act. Tether's trying to, I think, wrap themselves in U.S. entities, corporate shells, to get onshore with U.S. and start participating in that market. Right now, they're not allowed. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. Other thing to keep in mind is I'm pretty sure this Genius Act says that the stable coins have to be backed with 90-day or less paper, right?
Yeah.
So that's a different set of rate pressures than you might see otherwise. But I don't know. Panelists, you're the guy in the know. Tell me where I'm right, where I'm wrong.
Well, is this Genius Act? Is in GNS Group Act? Is that
Well, listen, on this show we don't provide any tickers. Okay, this is purely for entertainment.
Yeah.
No financial.
But we would love to see that company do well.
You should look into it. That's a good management team. Yeah, it's a good management team.
Yeah. Great community over there.
Matt Brunel not on that board. Okay, they're not worried about putting people on the board over there. They're just buying.
I think they're pretty low in the ranks though. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, look, it's hard as someone who is involved in the financial markets. It's very difficult to assess this kind of thing when the financial markets are so large as it is. So, and then there's something as well with like the SLR. I forget exactly, but basically there's a rule that banks have needed to hold certain levels of securities, and something that's going to happen in the fall, I believe, is going to allow them to hold more treasuries. So that could be something too. So Scott Besson has said he is the world's biggest bond salesman. Anything that he can do to get down the rates, I think they're going to do. I think the problem for them is they're simply not going to have a supportive Fed until they get their guy in. So they probably shouldn't be doing too much selling until Trump can put his guy in. These things around the edges can probably help a little bit, but not that much.
We're going to see. We're going to see. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to share this program with your friends and family, your mechanic, your priest. And until next time, take care of yourselves.